everybody. Thank you, me from the future. Welcome to this very special PDXCON Global Build-Off, where we've had a ton of submissions from all over the world trying to build the most eco-friendly functional suburb. We have gotten submissions from all over the world, and we've passed them along to our beautiful judges, and we've graded them on eco-friendliness, functionality, creativity, and aesthetics. They have only been able to use the base game, DLC, and CCPs. And the winners of this beautiful, beautiful contest will win codes to the new CCPs announced yesterday during the announcement show. Let me introduce you guys to the judges. Say hello, judges.
Hello.
Hello, judges.
Hello. All right, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Kazjim, why don't you start?
My name's Kazjim. I stream City Skylines. I'm the host of the contest Cities in a Snap, also Games in a Snap, and yeah, I'm just here to judge some cities. I love looking at them.
You have a ton of experience. I'm really glad that we have you here for like how many cities in a snap has there been? Do you know the number?
56 total.
So you have a ton of city judging experience. I'm excited.
56 judgmental Kaz moments is what it comes down to.
Now, is there a compilation?
Oh my goodness, no. I could probably ask my guys about that. Let me get back to you on that.
Video idea. All right, Samantha.
Yeah, hello. I am Samantha, or Avenya. You might know me better as. I make assets for City Skylines. I made a content creator pack, and I work as a community manager for Colossal Order now.
Yeah, and you answered so many questions right before we started this stream, right?
Yep.
All right, Jan.
Who's that?
Huh?
Oh,
Jan?
it's me.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello. I'm Jan. You might also know me as Simulation Jan. I'm a community ambassador for City Skylines. You've probably seen me just about everywhere where we post. And I've been the one annoying you with all those team posts. I'm also more commonly known as Maddie's personal pain in the ass.
Yes, that is correct. I can't get it off of me. All right. So before we look at the first submission, what were the things that you guys were looking at the most? I mean, excluding all of the specific green, eco-friendly things. Like, what was there something that you were looking at that was like, this is important to me?
Transit. Just seeing, is there transit, is there infrastructure, and more importantly, is it green transit? Little things like, are they using gasoline versus biofuel buses, things like that, because just the little things help sell a city, because anyone can do a macroscopic, I'm going to plant a lot of trees, but it takes a lot more thought to actually put in things like that and bike paths, things like that.
100%.
I was really curious to see how they handled industry. That's sort of my niche area. And that's something that pollutes a lot. So I was really curious to see how they were going to sort of approach that from a green perspective.
What about
I
you,
had
Jan?
a lot of fun trying to figure out if they've built it in clusters. So if a certain cluster of a suburb would have all the necessary facilities, from schools to shops to workplaces, that will allow that kind of green living, but everything's a bit more integrated.
Yeah. I mean, personally, because I was also a judge in these judging proceedings, I was looking at just roads. I love getting a road system to work, like lane math and using the right roads in the right places, and also looking at just how well the traffic flowed. That was what I was focusing on mainly. Cool. All right. I think we're ready to look at our first submission. The first submission is by Sam Hanwich Live, Fremont City. Let's. Wow. All right.
So
So
green.
all of our contestants wrote a little blurb about their city. So I'm just gonna pull a couple keywords from it. The city of Fremont has 50,000 residents. They have 30 parks, which is a crazy number, like zoned little parks. And then they have all the areas are accessible by mass transportation, including our large biofuel bus system. And they have a lot of biking. We all watched these videos in advance, so let's see what notes we had. Jan, you start this time.
I started this time. So 50,000 people in 30 parks. That's a park per 12,000 people.
Math.
That's a lot of parks. And I like that there's a lot of parks. Obviously, we all enjoy the green spaces, which I really enjoyed. One of the things that stood out for me on this one was it had also kind of a botanical garden, which I guess is classified as a park, but it's slightly more extensive, and I kind of like seeing that aspect of trying to preserve nature, especially, knowing what's happening with the world. It's nice seeing it integrated into a city. It was also integrated kind of smoothly, so you kind of couldn't really see where the park ended and the suburb started, which was a very nice touch for me. The road still stood out to me. There was still felt like a lot of it, but it had good walkability, had good public transport, and everyone loves a nature reserve.
Who does it? Go camping, have a little barbecue. Beautiful. All
Barbecue
right.
in a nature reserve, Matty? Are you trying to burn it down?
Well, in designated spots, obviously. Little barbecues. Yes.
Be smart.
Be smart. Kazdim, what did you think?
Obviously, one thing I mentioned I was looking for was, the transit, what kind of buses are they using, if they use those, bike paths, and this one checked a lot of those for me. Something that I actually really liked was they actually spent some time making sure that you didn't just have kind of parallel bus routes and bike routes. Upon looking at the video a bit more closely, they actually have a lot of bike routes leading to bus systems, or maybe you've got bike paths that are going through the parks that Jan so obviously likes. And it's a lot of integration, because a lot of times we just decide, okay, no bikes, or we just say, slam it alongside the avenues, or we just use them as shortcuts through parks. But they've done a little bit of everything, and they've incorporated the transit, and I think that's absolutely great. Another thing that I actually do like is the fact that there are a lot of micro parks, because it reminds me of a place such as New York City in the past couple decades, where they've actually spent a lot of money saying, okay, this is an old abandoned building, it goes away, we're going to put a little micro park in its place. And there's just so many of them, it's nuts. I was there several years back, and I was like, I had no idea they had this many parks. It's kind of insane.
It feels so green on like a street level.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously macroscopic, it's just like, oh yeah, is this really you're in New York City? But at the microscopic level, yeah, you've got these little neighborhood parks where you can kind of forget about it. And then obviously, of course, Central Park, but that's a different story.
It ends up feeling like a little oasis in the city. It's like an oasis in the desert.
Yeah,
It's in the
it's like a
desert of
green
concrete.
oasis.
So it's always nice you stumble across one as you walk through any major metropolis. You stumble across one, and just that it almost feels like it's a source of fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. Also a community gathering point, which is really important.
For sure. All right, Sam, what do you got? Anything else to add?
The traffic, I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but I think it really showed really well thought out, like, traffic. There's almost none on the roads. And that was one thing that I sort of noted, is that there are a lot of large roads that aren't actually needed because they've achieved such great traffic with the bike lanes and the shortcuts and paths and public transportation. I just wish there was a little less concrete and a little more green in that, but like really impressed with the traffic flow.
I mean, maybe it's just from the angle that they had a lot, but then they've been going green, so these are just kind of the remnants of it.
Yeah. If you provide good bike transportation or like bike lanes on roads, car use will go like 50% down. If you give them a bike path to get from point A to point B, they will ride a bike.
Yeah, it's also a lot of shortcuts. creating a lot of shortcuts in any city scanline city is important. So when you create those shortcuts, you lose all that road traffic.
Yes.
Which is a good opportunity to either replace it with something else, especially if you're playing modded. You can do so many things to kind of present that. Obviously, in vanilla, you're a little bit more constrained, but it's nice to see that kind of transition. It's sort of remnant of Boston when they had the
right, burying the highway.
Yeah, it kind of gives you that as the usage decreases, you get more green space coming in. It's a very good representation of that.
For sure, for sure. All right. Anything else to add, or should we go on to our next runner-up?
Nothing here.
All right, let's do our next runner-up. We have Green Hill by Scottish Capybara. Welcome back. All right, that was Green Hill. My favorite video, I think. We were talking about that while we were watching it, but the edits, I think they're so great.
The edits were fantastic.
It's the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
It just adds that little bit more that makes you slightly more interested, and then you're like, oh. And then you see how they kind of integrated that little breaking news segment into the city itself.
Yeah, well, let's start with Sam. What do you think?
I mean, we have to start with just playing a challenge with disaster zone. I mean, that was just the first thing I noticed about the city, and I was like, that is crazy and amazing and cool. And I mean, and then unlucky with meteors on top of that. I love how they've been incorporated the meteor craters into the city and made them like natural features in it. That is really, really cool. I'm also impressed with like how much they've like managed to build up. They've stuck to like one tile, I think.
Yeah.
And done that and just squeezed in everything. I love how the green suburb is like up in the mountain and just like playing to the natural environment and like with the natural preserve as well. That is just a really, really cool take on it, I think.
Yeah. Kaz.
So obviously, big props just to the breaking news thing and the meteors. I'm a big fan of both of those things because it's just so fun to do. Because obviously, we've all played the game with disasters on, and then I saw that and I immediately heard the radio voice in my head. So I think all of us probably did.
It's burned
and
in.
I'm always partial to meteors and disasters, so I love the meteor touch. So, but overall, something else I really liked was not only is it in the mountains, as Samantha mentioned, but also actually using the terrain to add to the beautification, because so often we're so tempted to be like, okay, I'm going to draw a road from here, up the side of the mountain and call it a day, but they in several spots did some wiggles. They sat there and did some curves going up in several spots, and I would like to see a whole lot more of that because not many people do that at all. And so seeing that at all was amazing, and I always love that. I'm a sucker for that. But one thing also, just as mentioned, incorporating the disasters and the meteors. I mean, having that be a green feature is really, really cool. And because with a real city, you don't just, oh man, we had some disaster, we're just going to pour some dirt in it and call it a day. It gets turned into a nature area, it gets turned into some sort of monument or some national park, something like that. That's just how it goes. And I really like that. And just props on the humor in the video. Just absolute props. I can't say that enough.
As a person who plays 100% like sandbox all the time, if I want to build it, I'm going to build it. Like nothing gets in my way. Watching somebody build just even with just the money, like without unlimited money, and then adding disasters frightens me to begin with. It scares me. I never want to do it. It's scary.
Right.
But it's so impressive. I couldn't do it. I can never do it.
I think there's
honestly,
also
adds an extra challenge.
Yes.
and there's also that little bit of satisfaction.
Oh, that's true. I bet you feel a lot more like it feels the accomplishment of having to overcome those things. Yeah, definitely.
But it's also that little bit of satisfaction when you've created something and you just smash a meteor into it.
The reverse satisfaction of destroying what you built. Yes.
Yeah. Just, oh man, I built this beautiful thing, but I also remember the pain and suffering it caused me emotionally. So I'm just gonna throw meteors at it for like.
God, I've spent 7 hours building this tiny 3x3 square. I hate you, square. Here's a meteor.
Yeah, the meteor cleanses all sins. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Build like a giant parking lot and then watching all the cars just whee.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Satisfying.
The first time I noticed the cars flying in this game, I almost died laughing because that's just it's an unnecessary detail, but it's just like yes,
it's beautiful in its own way.
I mean, it's also lovely, getting a tsunami and just seeing that ocean liner just fall into the city. That's also satisfying.
Or seeing the one defiant freighter actually like go against it and somehow succeed, and you're just like, That's Dangerous Dan over there.
Dangerous Dan.
That one definitely isn't going to block anything else.
Not at all.
I'd say too soon, but it's really not.
I guess another thing about this one, they did include the little trash island. So pollution was really, really great in just like the green suburb part. But then they had that trash island, which I'm not taking away points for that, but I like that they put it on like just in the one spot rather than having like a big area.
Yeah, it's isolated, so like it doesn't affect the city the same way. And like we see the green choices for power for the city, and the industry is forestry. So like there's definitely been attempts to minimize pollution as much as possible, I think.
For sure.
But it was also one of those that was... It felt like one half was built very green and the other wasn't. So that you kind of had the downtown core area, which didn't seem to involve much of kind of this green philosophy that we were looking for. So it was that kind of contrast between one and the other, which is always interesting to see as well, because it kind of almost feels like two separate cities that share that river in between. Obviously the suburb was a suburb, and we did see that there were two smaller bridges going over, and I think there's a ferry line in this one that kind of goes between the two.
Yes.
But I was missing a bit more of that kind of transport link between the two cities. It felt a little bit constrained. Obviously, you will have the transport. There was buses as well, I think, but it didn't. It missed something. Maybe a rail connection, a monorail connection, some sort of more like these smaller pedestrian bridges or bike bridges that go over that
Yeah,
kind of
bike
allow
bridge.
more of that.
Cable cars would have been cool to use here, both like
Yep.
across the river, but also as an opportunity to go up the mountain itself.
That could have been really awesome. And honestly, you don't have many amazing opportunities for the cable cars. But I mean, sitting there and going that way, that would be really great. Or even just like going near or across that crater, that would be another great opportunity because that's such a simple tourist attraction. Obviously, we can't treat the cable cars as tourist attractions in game, but we can imagine. And we can imagine that, oh, sweet, you're paying, $10 to ride this and look down and say, oh, sweet, there's, a meteor hole. That's great. And so I think that's a really great idea.
I would ride that in real life.
Oh,
Oh,
I
same.
totally would too.
Oh yeah.
It'd be super
All
awesome.
right, now I need a city to get hit by it. No, just kidding.
Okay, let's not jinx it.
You go on foot because you want to see it, and there's probably some sort of a science exhibit. But then it's also so cool to be able to see it from a cable car, see it from like a bird's eye perspective almost, which we rarely get to do unless you are on a plane or you happen to be on top of a mountain that's in the city.
Yeah.
So that would have been a very cool integration there. I think with a lot of these, the one we've seen and the ones we're to see, there's just those little things which is more encompassing, add that little bit of an edge.
Mm-hmm.
So that little bit of additional thought that goes into it is always very appreciated to see, especially because often even those of us that do play heavily modded and we do play super sandboxy, even when we do see these vanilla cities and they do something cool, it inspires all of us.
Yes.
I understand it was a limited time constraint, and people had to rush, and sometimes those creative juices don't flow. But it was a very cool idea. I really liked. I also really liked the pedestrian path that kind of went along the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
That was a really good feature.
I would be
completely forgot
walking
about
there
that.
every day.
I mean, speaking of
that'd
paths,
be a great way to go to work.
Speaking of paths, the road layout. I thought the road layout was pretty good. We did only have like one highway connection to the outside world, but I think because the city was just like one tile, that's kind of appropriate, and the traffic flow seemed pretty good.
Yeah, no real backups, no big issues. No, I didn't personally see any areas where it was just going to become like a gridlock, but I was too distracted by the many other features of the city to notice that maybe.
It was definitely one of those that was well laid out. And again, love the fact that the natural features of the map are used.
Yes.
That is one of my favorite things to do. We know Maddie prefers flat ground.
I have grown as a city builder.
You have.
So a little bit.
She built on little hills now.
There's very
she has a little hill in. But it's always nice to see how people tackle the kind of the natural features of the map itself. Yeah. And I think this one did that really well.
Definitely.
Let's move on to our next nominee. Our next runner-up is going to be Crater Falls City by Captain Obvious. Take it. right. That was Crater Falls City by Captain Obvious, which is such a cool name. This is also a progressive city. So this city was also built with money and absolutely no mods at all, not even unlimited money or unlimited soil. He built it in 3 days, which is super impressive. It has a population of 15,000 people, and it has a traffic flow of 94%. It has no pollution. No, none at all.
It's so typical.
Yeah.
Why? Typical. Explain.
I have judged this guy's cities multiple times. He's a good friend, and he participates a lot in Cities in a Snap. And he always goes for, like, traffic can be the last thing on the rubric that week. And he's like, by the way, I've got like 96% traffic flow too. And it's like, but you also built a really cool thing over there somehow in this time. But no, it's just so typical. Like, he always does this amazing stuff, and he's building in a map that I know he's familiar with. And another thing that I really adore about this particular build is the fact that it was done, again, as an actual progression build. And it's in one of the newer maps. It's a map that I have some pretty fond memories of. That was my first Sunset Harbor map. And a lot of really good things happening in the city, such as, the road layout looks great. There's pretty good transportation as well. And one other thing that is really great here, actually good placement of bridges. That's like a weird thing to compliment, but the fact that's not just like, okay, we're gonna take bridges and put them every other block, and the fact that's also not just, okay, we're only gonna have like a bridge that leads away from the main area, because it's really tempting to go either way, but there's actually a nice balance. It doesn't feel overwhelming, and at the same time, he's got a good use of the waterfronts too. Mm-hmm. That's something that you don't see all the time, because too often we're just like, okay, slap down a port and we're back in the main city, but he actually utilizes full swaths of the waterfront, and I think that's absolutely great.
Yeah.
It was one of those more interesting cities to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Obviously, we had additional screenshots to look at, so we kind of were able to see bits and bobs a bit more clearly. But it was definitely, it also, like one of the previous ones we looked at, it felt like a city in transition. Right. It's a city that's slowly transitioning. I mean, in the end of the video, we still saw those kind of bits of polluted ground that showed up here and there, but it feels like it's being managed, kind of cut off from each other, created into these little pockets, and slowly getting managed and taken away. And it's one of those exciting things to see. It's exciting to see someone take a city or go in with the idea of, I'm going to build a city and then transition it into a green city. Mm-hmm. It felt like almost adding a challenge onto the challenge, which is fun to see, because it's easier, I feel personally, it's easier to go in with the mindset, I'm going to build a green city, than it is to get that transition from a existing city into a green city. Yeah. Like Hasjam said as well, the transport links were fantastic. I love that it's a map that has those kind of separated islands, which then allow you to create these bridges. I am personally a fan of bridges because they add something nice to the waterfront itself.
Mm-hmm.
They're nice focal points too.
Yeah. And there's also just something about being able to get on a river or get on a boat and just slowly seeing that kind of panorama of the city that also has like that nice bridge, like Sydney Harbor is a good example, Brooklyn Bridge, Tower Bridge.
That add to the skyline.
Yeah, they just add a little bit in the kind of, it almost reminds you of those little kind of like blood vessels in the, it just connects the city. It makes it feel like one bit.
Yes.
So that was very, very lovely. It was a very, very good city. One of the things that I do miss with a lot of these, I've noticed, is trains. Where are your trains, people?
I know. I'm also looking. I'm sitting here, and I felt this way too. It's just like, man, trains are such a good way to ditch the pavement, say goodbye to highways, and It's
Just
it's
give
so
me
sad.
some
I love trains.
trains.
Just like one train, even if it's like a one little short little train. Like that's all I want. Just satisfy me.
I think
give me a
this
train.
city is like the first one where we could have seen a train because the other ones were relatively small, but this one was sort of sprawling a little bit. It did reach quite far on the map. So having like just a passenger train, a local passenger train, could have done a lot of good in the city, I think. All right. Sam, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah. I we haven't talked about the piers. I really love the piers. It was just one of the first things I saw when I looked at the screenshots. It's like all these piers sticking out in the water. I was like, I want to go there. I want to stand there and look out in the water. It looks so great. Like we already talked a little bit about how the coastline's really been utilized, and that's part of that. And I think that's really cool to see. It feels like the map has really been considered in the design here, and like the natural features of it and the placement of the city. I also I don't know how I feel about the industry sort of inside the city. It feels funny, but it's also I really like it in some way as well. It's not something you typically see. Typically you see, industry far away on the outskirts of the city, and I guess at some point in the city they were on the outskirts and then the city grew around it. That really gives that feel of the city having just grown and progressed naturally as they've expanded on the map. I really like that.
It is also one of those newer philosophies when it comes to building cities and expanding cities and revitalizing areas, is trying to build that clean, high-tech industry back into the city. So it's kind of nice seeing that slowly being integrated. Obviously we see big tech company centers all around, but we also see smaller manufacturers that pop up now in more core areas of the city. Again, it's part of that kind of living leisure work integration that makes a green city it makes it a successful city, because you give people the ability to do all those things within their area without constricting them to their area.
Yes.
I can agree with that. And something else too. So not only with the industries is it nice and spread out, but also Samantha's piers and whatnot. It's not just like one block of piers and then you move away. Like you actually see several of them in several places, because that's something that I feel a lot of people do. At least I see it a lot, where people will get interested in something for a few hours when they're building a city, and they'll be like, okay, I'm all about piers. And so this one area of the city has got a lot of piers, and this other area has super dense warehouses for all the industries, and then it's just none of it for the rest of the map. And that's something that not just this map, but all of them, but this one in particular happened to hit a really good note on, just making sure that it wasn't just super clustered in one area, making sure it actually felt organic and natural. And yeah, there were some denser pockets of it for the industry and the piers and whatnot, but honestly, it worked. It felt organic.
Yeah, it feels like it's a part of the design of the whole city and not just an area. Like, I'm guilty of doing that. Oh, we have piers over here where the tourists are, and then nothing else on the coastline.
This is the pier district.
Yeah, exactly. And this is really like the whole city has them sticking out everywhere, which makes sense for a city with so much like water and river and lakes that, of course, they're going to be piers.
It's another one of those things. We talked about how this is this feels more like a city that's in natural progression. Obviously, on a map like this, you would have, as the city grows and as the districts create, they would want access to that vital transportation link, which especially a lot of European cities grew because of the river, because the river was that main transport link. So it is a very nice thing to see. To be integrated into kind of the life.
Is that a transport link on that map though? Because that could have been either like intentional design philosophy or not. I don't remember if it actually has shipping traffic. I want to say it doesn't.
Even if it doesn't, it still brings that story into the history of the city.
Oh yeah, it does.
It's a very nice touch. Very, very.
Even
nice.
if it's just aesthetically shipping industry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that a word? I made it a word now.
I'm thinking about the functionality.
Yes. I think a thing that I mean, I'm not saying that the last city went overboard, but the last city had a lot of bike paths on the roads, which this city, watching the video again, I noticed I didn't see a lot of bike paths on those roads. I feel like we could have upped the bike infrastructure a lot to allow for that different type of transport. I think that would have really improved, like on the avenues and even on the normal suburb streets. There were a lot of like roads with grass on the sides, but not a lot of bike. That would have been good. I don't have a lot of input.
That's
you already
odd.
stole all my talking points.
Oh, well, no. But, I mean, honestly, the city had so many other points that we just kind of glossed over that fact.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, lack of bike infrastructure, I think that's honestly a great simple improvement in this case.
Yeah.
Because you can just take the bike roads and then, it doesn't have to be everywhere. You just need some bicycle networks that lead to different areas of the city, even if it's just a couple main roads that just take you from one major area to another. That takes so much traffic off, and obviously not just this city, but just in general. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah,
It's so
a great
simple.
improvement. It's
so
a
simple
great
to do.
improvement, and it's easy to do because we see it in cities all the time.
Yeah.
As traffic flow improves or as bike paths are introduced, they just dedicate a lane or they make the lane slightly narrower to add a bike path without having to destroy large swaths of the city. So yeah, that's definitely a very good point.
Awesome. All right, and anything else? Anything else to add?
I think we've covered everything with this one, more or less.
You're safe.
You're safe. All right, let's move on to our first of 3 winners, Eco Heights by North. I love it. This is like if we just talk like aesthetics, this is my favorite one. I gave it a 10 on aesthetics. Whenever somebody uses cities as like not just like building cities art form, but like an art tool sort of, I love it. I think it's super cool.
It's a very beautiful one.
It is.
I think we all gave it 10s.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, I was just like, it's like, it's a flower. Oh my god. I love it.
Flower, yay.
Yeah. And there are flower trees inside the flower.
Yeah.
Flower reception.
It made it that more exciting. But on the other hand, we have that contrast, right?
Yeah.
Aesthetically very beautiful.
But functionality.
Functionality, I suppose it would still be very functional because there was a lot of pedestrian paths that kind of connected all the petals and the leaves, but it was the complete contrast from the previous city.
Mm-hmm.
The previous city, we talked a lot about organic growth, organic development of a city transitioning to a green city. This one is very planned.
A polar opposite. Yeah.
It's a complete polar opposite. Doesn't mean it's not beautiful and it doesn't work. It is beautiful and it does seem to work. But it's definitely a much more planned one. One of the things that stuck out to me in this one, especially when watching the video, is those gigantic 8-lane roads.
It's for brush size. I get it, but it's also not super necessary on like a functionality standpoint.
Yeah, from a functionality standpoint, that was definitely something that's. I mean, lots of bike paths. Would have loved to see more kind of dedicated bike paths, rather than them being just on the road. But yeah, those 8-lane avenue thingies.
Well, honestly, and you want to talk about brush size, what you could do there is just shrink that down to maybe the avenue with trees, and then that does remove a bit of the pavement, but you can kind of gain the pavement back and get some of that bike infrastructure back just by putting one, if not two, bike lanes down that big central stem of the flower. And I think that would have probably accomplished the same thing, and it would have felt a little bit more green, even if you wanted to put like main bike lane on one side, pedestrian path on another. That's another pretty cool thing I see done. But that would have been a great way to keep the brush size and not have that big 8-lane road. That's just haunting Jan's dreams now.
I would have put a road, a bicycle path, and then a train.
Oh yeah, where are the trains? No trains.
Or a tram.
Another city, no tree, no trains.
Dedicated bus lanes, something that kind of separates it out a little bit. It doesn't give you that kind of big block of concrete. It kind of gives you separated segments, makes it look a little bit better.
Yeah.
It will also have given it a nicer outline, I feel. It'll like emphasize that outline a bit. But it's a very beautiful city. I do love that they use the natural rock formations.
Yes.
Or what would have been natural rock formations in one of the parks. It was definitely very aesthetically beautiful city. Well thought out. But those values, I can't get over them. Just,
I understand the use, but it frustrates me.
Yes, it does.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, all I was going to say is that just building on that, I mean, something else that this city does really well is just not just the macroscopic, it's a giant flower, but as has been touched on, just all the little things. I mean, there's flowers within the flowers, flower reception thing going on. And the other thing that I think is pretty well done here is the fact that you don't have to travel far to get where you need to go in this city, just because of the structure for it, some of the shortcuts that exist that Jan mentioned a couple videos ago. We've got a lot of those little things that make a big difference in the end. And that's something that, for me, made me very happy looking at this city, because that part was pretty well planned out. And it kind of reminded me, I know that they exist. I'm drawing a blank on where they are in the world, but I know a couple different areas in the world that are doing these pre-planned suburbs and neighborhoods and all that are almost like artwork, like spirals, things like that, or even palm trees. I think I've seen in one place.
That's Dubai.
So it is a thing. Yeah, that's Dubai. That's what it was. I was like, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but no. So I think it's really cool, and it's very relevant, particularly as we, look at all this urban renewal stuff.
For sure. It had pretty great bus traffic. It didn't have a ton of different transport types, but it did have a lot of bus. It had like that big bus depot, the bus hub. So it did have a lot of public transport, but I think it could have done with like maybe a metro. Like, sure, you might not want to like disrupt the look of the flower with, I don't know, like monorail or something that goes across it, jets across. But maybe adding something like underground, like a metro, would be a good way to transport people a little bit further. Because it's not huge, but you could, they'll still have to walk pretty far if they want to not use a car.
I think I would see a tram doing well.
A tram would do well.
A tram would be really good.
Even a monorail just on the stem. Mm-hmm. You have this central artery that gets people in and out, and that was definitely missing. The transport links, while they kind of blended in because it was only buses. And this is something we've talked about with a couple of cities. Is there's the lack of obvious public transport.
Yes.
Buses tend to kind of blend in because they are still motor transport. They're still on the roads. You kind of don't see the separation. But yeah, it was definitely missing that just feel of it.
It also ties into like the connection to the outside world, which is, this city you would come by to like in a car. And if we're talking about green design and that, we want that sort of public transport on the long distances as well. And buses design really going to cut that.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because it looks like a planned neighborhood as an addition to an existing city. So
Right.
you want people to be able to. You have to think of convenience. Is it more convenient for your citizen to sit in a car to drive for 20 minutes downtown? Or is it more convenient for them to sit on a train or sit on a tram, sit on a monorail, metro, whichever you use, to get from near where they live to wherever they need to go? If you have those cheap, readily available options, people do tend to prefer them over using a car. So that was definitely something. While the usage didn't show much in the video, I feel that on a day-to-day basis, you would still see a large amount of personal vehicles going around.
Honestly, even if you didn't want to kind of damage the flower, so to speak, what about just a park and ride solution? So right off the main road that would lead to the hypothetical downtown or the hypothetical center of the metro, you just be parked there, you hop on the train, you go in like you'd see in a place like Dallas, Fort Worth. And that's a very popular mode of transit down there for a reason. It works really well.
Yeah, it's also, we see it a lot in Europe as well. A lot of European cities, they have started really utilizing that park and ride system, which is a fantastic system. And it tends to work really well. Obviously, you can't extend the public line to everyone's house. That would
Right.
be bullying.
So drive 5 minutes, get to the train, ride that for 30 minutes. It's a really good hybrid.
Yeah. Those big
Yeah, and
suburbs, they need that like second mode of transport to get from
Most definitely.
Yeah.
A to B.
And as far as I can tell, the city also doesn't have any or the suburb doesn't have any local industry. So we're also talking about like cargo that needs to come in, because I think there's commercial.
Yeah.
It might be self-sustaining, but it still needs something to like produce the local organic stuff.
Right.
So like some sort of like better option than trucks coming in would be great, because trucks are horrible for pollution. One thing I also
helped a lot.
yeah. One thing I also like looked at this and was like, oh, like there's a missed opportunity here. Is all the dead end roads don't have a path connecting to, like, there's a big road right on the other side of it, and there's no path, and you want to have that path connection so people can easily get to those, like, or at least a bike lane there, so people don't have to go all the way around to get to the main arterial roads.
Gotta add a little bit more walkability, a couple more modes of transport, a better connection to like the outside world. I guess the rest of the city.
What's that again?
I don't know. I've never been outside. I haven't been outside in a year. I'm locked in this box.
Matt lives in the studio.
Yeah, I live here.
That's why they didn't bring any of us there, because it's just it's just a mess.
It's the real reason.
They're just afraid.
Yeah. But I really liked it. Aesthetically, it scored really, really high. But then in functionality, because the city was clearly aimed to be more aesthetic than functional, in the functional, it did not score as well. But it is still one of our winners.
It is.
Yeah.
Are we ready to move on to winner number 2?
Are we?
Do you have more? Do you have more? You want to say one more thing, Jan?
No.
Okay. All right, let's move
Just
on.
bringing you along.
Yeah, let's move on to winner number 2, Green Village by Emperor Ping the Fourth. All right, that was Green Village by Emperor Ping the Fourth. This is in the description. He does list that it is a separate part from his main city, but it is completely just what is it called? Self-sustaining. So it has its own green power and green water. So it is a part, but completely green. Just want to note this. All right. What thoughts? Thoughts, jury. Trains.
Yeah, finally. It's just finally the trains have been given to us from the heavens, and we can celebrate. We can ride them all day. That's all that matters. We're actually going to quit this now and go ride the trains.
Yes.
My voice from now traveled into the past, and someone listened.
Good.
In general, this city reminded me of it's
What's the word?
It's popping from my head. I can't remember it, but it reminded me of all those cities where there may be historic cities or maybe not historic cities, but the kind of the downtown gets too dense, so that there isn't enough space for the government to expand. So they've created this governmental district.
Oh yes. Like Australia didn't, or like
Australia,
you mean like the whole city or Brazil?
Yeah, Brazil or Egypt is doing.
Oh right, yes.
Near Cairo, but it definitely reminded me very much of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is like great swath kind of overall plan, and it's beautiful. I like that, but it also felt empty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it felt slightly not necessarily devoid of life, but it felt empty. Like there were
unorganic.
Not really unorganic, but it felt like there was so much more that was waiting for construction.
Mm-hmm.
That construction hasn't started on, and that kind of showed in the fact that they talked about how there's slightly separated districts within it.
Yeah.
It definitely felt like that. I did like that the highway was slightly submerged. It again reminded me of Boston, the Big Dig,
Right.
but it was still a highway that went straight through the center of it.
Yes.
Which isn't optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely kind of breaks that maybe green suburb vibe. But overall, the transport links looked fantastic. Infrastructure in that city was fantastic. It was aesthetically pleasing with that curving road going through the middle.
Yes.
You did have that kind of connection where if routes were taken where you took a polluting vehicle, it was kind of shortened.
Mm-hmm.
It was a short from A to B, instead of having to drive around for 30 minutes to travel 2 miles. But it definitely that highway down the middle, it kind of breaks it apart, and it just felt empty.
Yeah. I think it felt, but I don't think for me it didn't feel empty. It just felt new.
Yeah.
I guess
didn't feel
maybe
very lived in.
Yes.
There you go.
It didn't feel very lived in.
That was kind of the difference between the previous one and this one.
Yeah.
The previous one was also a very planned new district, but that one felt more alive.
Mm-hmm.
Right, a little bit more activity, a bit more motion, things like that. But one thing that you did mention, obviously what's been mentioned in general is just the transport links are overall quite good, but there's still a missing link for me on that transport, which is just the little branches. So just because there are a lot of areas where the dead end ends here and then you've got a main road right here, sometimes that person needs an easy way to hop that gap, so to speak.
Yeah,
so
like
I'd
Samantha
to see
was
a few
talking
more
about
of those.
before.
Yeah, like Samantha was
we
talking
did
about
see
before.
some of those, so which we didn't necessarily in the previous one. In this one, there were a couple where there was that kind of little bit of connection.
There were several noticeable ones, but honestly, just go nuts with it because you want more people to use it.
Yeah. I think it had really, really good traffic though. Like the functionality, like traffic flow, great. I think this one might also, like the flower, it might have gotten on that like we're gonna pre-plan and make the roads super wide. that the super wide road in the middle could have been smaller. I think with just adding like bike paths or using I'm not 100% sure about like how the traffic flow was, but it looked really good. So it might not even need to be that wide. Like I think it's either like to pre-plan, like there might be more traffic in the future, or it for aesthetics that wider road was chosen.
Yeah, like we said, it's planned.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It felt planned. It felt like along those roads, they were meant to be skyscrapers or meant to be the really populous buildings.
Yeah.
It could also be that it's just, I mean, kind of like the in development part where that's the highway that was there and they're injecting this into it type thing. And they're just trying to make the best of what was once there, because very frequently you can't really afford to sit there and just tear out part of a highway. I mean, we think that's relatively easy, but even just logistically, it is a bit of a nightmare to take out a couple lanes from a highway or from a road. Trust me, the city that I'm near, Oklahoma City, they've been tearing out lanes in the downtown roads for trying to make it more walkable. But anytime they work on it, and those are just little roads, it's a nightmare for months and months when they're on that block. So for a highway, it's even worse. So I actually, for one, I kind of like the fact that's there, because to me, it actually adds a bit more story, adds a bit more life. They're trying to make it better. And maybe it's not quite there yet, because maybe they dream of getting rid of that high, or at least, bringing the highway in a little bit, narrowing it. But for me, I kind of like the city to have a bit of a story.
Yeah,
I really love the emptiness of it. Like this city has sort of it has the high density. So the way I'm looking at it is, it has a certain population it needs to incorporate. It could have just done low density and filled in all the area, like we've seen, tightly packed, eco-friendly suburbs. But it's gone up instead, which leaves room for these like natural fields to stick around. And I really like that. Like that is something that, a lot of the times we sacrifice for suburbs. And it's kept that so you would have like a really good biodiversity in this area, because there is just all of this land that is still left to just be natural in whatever state it's always been in. And I really like that. I really like that take on it of going up instead of just filling out the available land.
Mm-hmm. You must have also really liked like the surrounding park, all around the exterior roads. There was like a big wide park all around.
Yeah, you can go camping, as we saw in the video.
Yeah, go camping, chill out, have a nice pancake. I was going to say pancake. Picnic.
I mean, you can have pancakes
in the park. You can do that, I guess. Clearly, I want pancakes.
Yeah, but to touch again on that, it did feel nice.
Yeah.
At the same time, that there was a lot of space reserved for nature, but even if it was reserved for nature, and that is a fantastic thing to do, it felt, from an aesthetic point of view, not necessarily from a city development point of view, that it needed more trees, more bushes, more just something to make it a little bit more diverse, rather than to keep that kind of empty plain. It kind of felt like an unfinished canvas. One of the things that
pass or two with the tree brush.
Yeah, just a couple more here and there to kind of give it that little bit more feel, even of a natural feel. City Skylines can sometimes, if you kind of give it if it's devoid of all, or mostly devoid of all kind of foliage, it does get very flat aesthetically. So it definitely felt like it needed just a couple of things more here and there. Obviously, biodiversity, it in that way increases, but we also have to remember that most species, no matter where we are, there is some sort of woodland. They do rely on trees, on bushes, taller grasses, things like that, to kind of get that ecosystem fully going. Mm-hmm. So we definitely felt that. Could have also just used a lake.
Oh yeah, some water.
I didn't even think about that. This was really lacking in water.
It felt almost like either arid or almost deserty a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely had a bit more of that feel. But in that case, if you're going for that look, you definitely have to then think harder to make it more than just a plain canvas. I mean, we as humans have always wanted green wherever we went. I mean, even if you look at some of the greater desert cities, there's always, they try so hard to incorporate that green in. Even if it's local flora and fauna that thrives in that environment, we tend to kind of concentrate it for our own purpose.
For beauty.
We also tend to like
Brilliant.
curate it. So it's, it's not necessarily the species that we, it's the pretty flowers or the pretty bushes, and not necessarily the ones that the environment needs so much. I really like the empty fields here, but it might be because my town has this thing where they're actually like planting wildflowers in areas, trying to help bees and like butterflies and insects like that, because we've just been terrible with the environment for years. And I'm sort of like, that's what I envision when I see those like big empty grassy fields, is just like wild grass and wildflowers and that sort of insect activity that doesn't really get a whole lot of room usually when we have, nice green like cut lawns or parks that are trimmed and that sort of thing. Like the wild nature that is sort of not left that much space these days.
It's definitely looking at it like that, with that little bit. It's left to the imagination, which is lovely.
Right.
So yeah, I personally would have liked to see a bit more foliage, just a bit. It doesn't even need to be really tall foliage, dense forest, whatever. Just bits here and there. The game does offer many,
just a few bush clusters, or maybe even a couple of just rocks, maybe just
something that kind of adds that breaks it apart. That breaks the kind of monotony of just a plain field. Because even a plain field anywhere in the world, it's not just a plain. There's always something that adds a little bit into it.
A rolling hill, maybe.
A rolling hill. Using the terraform tools to add that little bit more diversity into it.
Yeah.
Also, just trees more near the highway kind of try to block that highway noise.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of pollution, noise pollution can make their citizens just as sick as normal pollution. So, planting trees is the best thing you can probably do if you experience a lot of noise.
It's also biodiversity. Again, we're going back to nature and to biodiversity, but it affects the rest of the nature as much as it affects us. So giving that kind of trying to shield noise pollution, especially from highways, is very important. But again, trains, so all is forgiven.
Yeah, exactly. Just immediately sways the other way. We don't need that yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all these cons over here. So many of them. But then trains.
Yeah.
No, but on the trains, I actually really enjoy the fact that it isn't just like a straightforward, okay, I'm just going to lay this down. There's actually a little bit of thought to the design of it, because a lot of people do make the mistake of just kind of the simple point A, point B, we're good. This one actually has a couple of curves. This one actually has a little bit of good integration. And honestly, I feel like places where I would see a train station. Mm-hmm. And that's such a weird thing to think about, because obviously with City Skylines, we're all about, okay, how can I maximize the traffic? But in this case, the train stations were actually in places that made good sense, places that I think a city might actually place them. So not only trains, but well-placed trains.
Yep, that's Kale that I was doing. Just up more for trains. We win. They win because of trains.
But this city did really, really good on many of the things that we judged it for. For aesthetics, it was like beautifully planned out. If like just looking at it, you got like those happy tingles. And then it functioned really well. It had really great pollution levels. It had really great. I mean, those are low levels. It sounded like they were high. And then like all the things that we scored for this one were really, really high. But then for, I think, functionality, it went down just a little bit especially for me, because of like the wideness of the roads, and there could have been a little bit more, I think, just walking infrastructure. I think it focused pretty highly on just roads, but overall it did pretty well.
It's one of those cities where I would have watched this person stream creating this city and then continued watching to see how they develop it from there.
Yes.
Right.
It definitely felt, like I said, a growing city that still...
I am curious to see the next step on this one in particular. I mean, all these cities I would gladly, watch on a stream or in a video to see where it goes, because I think all of them have potential. But this one in particular, it does kind of feel that come back for something more type thing. Yeah. And I think that probably had a little bit of appeal to me, whether I know it or not, because subconsciously I always liked that little bit.
Yeah, it was very enticing. It was very enticing.
Definitely a cool take on the challenge.
Yes.
Trains.
Oh, definitely. 100%.
Trains.
And trains.
That's all I judged everything
Trains.
on. Trains.
Trains. All
but
right.
it was definitely a good one.
Do we have any more points, or should we move on to our last winner?
I mean, I think we should.
Let's see.
I
Let's see the last one.
we've all been waiting to see who is going to win this season of Maddie's Global Build-Off.
God, I wish. All
my
right.
goodness.
All right, let's move on to the last submission. The winner of the winners, Green Mountain by Cool Quapil. All right, that was the final winner, and in my opinion, my favorite one. As much as I loved the flower for aesthetics, this one, like across the board, just scored more points with me because it felt so realistic. Like, this is the most realistic of all the cities. I just lost my voice. This was the most realistic of all the cities, and it looked so good. It looked so good.
She loved it so much she was almost left speechless.
Yes, I was gonna...
Almost is the key phrase.
Almost.
All right,
Because
Samantha, what do
we can never
you think of the city? What do you think?
I mean, this is my favorite too. It's just like the way the city just spreads out in the natural environment. It feels like a real city that's grown, and it's got like a great balance of low density and high density, and a high density core in the middle as well. And it's just like, it's beautiful. I love it. And I mean, when we start looking at the green options, it's incorporated the landscape. It's considered, if I remember the description right, there was like lots of bus stuff going on. It's got no trains, I think, but it has monorail.
Monorails are a train.
And even it has, I mean, except for trains, I think it has every other mode of transport. I'm pretty sure. Like it has cable car. It even has
cars.
It's not
blimps.
necessarily a bad thing, though.
It even has
because
blimps.
keep in mind, transport overload is a thing. Something I like here is that there's a clear hierarchy that the big boy transport it's the monorail. Like that's the big one. That's that hauls people. And then you've got kind of a structure from there because basically I operate under the assumption that you need 2 to 3 main lines of transport. And, sometimes it's rail or monorail, whatever you want to go for that future look or really heavy, whatever you want. And then medium can be anything from trams to metros. And then small being your buses, your trolleys, things like that. Sometimes trams if the city calls for it, but generally speaking, I don't mind the fact that doesn't have that because it hits all those boxes for me.
And it was feeder lines. You had a clear distinction of this main transport link with many feeder lines going into it that worked based on where they were placed.
Yes.
We saw that kind of really tall area, high area that did use those cable cars as kind of that kind of feeding line. And also, we were talking about aesthetics with the Flower City. This one aesthetically also kind of has that feel of all the roads and the transport kind of makes it look like the branches with the rest of the city making it look like a tree or a bush or whatever you want to call it. But it did have that kind of, when we saw the top-down view, it definitely reminded me of like a tree or even just a leaf. But it kind of had that very feel to it. Aesthetically beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I think it felt organic.
Yeah. It definitely
felt like
felt
it was.
that way.
It fit the map so well.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a real city in a way, like you could come across out in the real world.
It definitely does. It's kind of, I like that they used all available kind of, it shows they tried to use all available flatland and where they could, they slightly sprawled out, but it kind of was very nicely constrained by those valleys. And it just overall had that feeling of a city that may have been a really old city, but it has really embraced the nature around it. It's kind of almost one with it.
Right.
When we came to infrastructure, we've already touched on it. Yeah, there were roads, obviously, but it didn't feel... We didn't get that feeling of super heavy-duty roads that kind of dominated it. And that's something that can make or break the look of a city.
Yes.
Definitely. I mean, as far as the looks, though, they did nail it, like you mentioned, and it felt organic. It actually transitions. Something that a lot of people do is they just cut it off. They didn't do that. As they approached the mountains, it organically died down. And I think that's something that is incredible because most people just forget to do it, honestly. And other people just avoid it because they think it's difficult. But in this case,
slopes. They're dangerous. Sometimes you build on a slope and it doesn't look like it looks really great. It looked really great. I'm impressed.
This is how you build on a slope, man.
I have to take notes. Let me bring my notepad out.
Yeah. No, but I mean,
it definitely felt that way. It was, but it was also integrating the nature around it.
Yes.
So we saw there was a lot of wind farms.
Yes.
Because obviously you would have higher winds because of the difference in height. So it used that. Overall, so much green. There was that one shot where we kind of saw the wind farm in the corner and then it looked over the city and you kind of almost couldn't see the city in between the forest.
Yeah.
And it gave that lovely view of it, and then you were like, oh, there is houses down there. But they blended in so well. It genuinely such a beautiful, beautiful city.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of Park City, Utah. Because it's in the mountains, kind of tucked, and parts of it are literally tucked between two mountain faces, and the whole thing is very green for the most part, and it feels like the time I was getting those vibes here because, as you mentioned, you kind of lose sight of the city from certain angles. I mean, obviously, once you're down in there's like, okay, I'm obviously heading downtown, but if you're looking at it from like 2 streets over, it's like, man, there's a lot of trees here. I don't know where I am exactly, and I really do like that. And the other thing that I also do enjoy with the nature is the monorail actually doesn't disrupt it any. And I don't know if it was intentional with how they did the different viewings for us, but I didn't see too often where the monorail just broke the environment around it. And I think that's really excellent because too often we have a good form of transport and we're like, okay, down with the forest or through the mountain or any of that. They didn't do any of that. And I really appreciate that because that shows a lot of care for the city, and it shows that they did an excellent job of actually executing and making sure that the city itself functioned as a real city would, which no city is going to mow down a mountain just because they want to put a monorail through it. Let's be honest.
That's what we have cities for.
Definitely reminded you of one of those old cities that you would go to. But my favorite thing I feel is we got that vibe of, even though it is a big city, it feels like a small town.
Yeah.
You constantly get that small town feel. It feels like it's community building no matter where you are. So it definitely was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Right. One thing I would have liked, though, I would have liked a few more screenshots of just the little things, like little slice of life things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like such a weird nitpick thing. But the problem is the city has so much in it that I really do want to feel what it's like to be a sim in it. Because I mean, we have a few shots where we can kind of get an idea, but I want a couple shots of like, what does it look like if I'm just, walking out of the restaurant on the road near my house? Because I suspect it looks really magnificent, but I kind of want to see that magnificence a little bit. So, man, just give us that screenshot, give us that little video clip, something about that. That would really help sell it even further.
See, but that is the thing we talked about earlier, is getting that wanting to see more.
Yeah.
That kind of feel of wanting to see more. I want this save, and I want to spend hours going around looking at it.
Yep.
And I think that's what also made it such a fantastic winner, is the fact that you want to see more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being invaded.
No, I definitely agree. Yes, we see the invader. Not really invader. I mean, hey, I like the cat.
I've been invaded.
My cats are lazy. They're sleeping right now.
She's been sleeping the entire time. We started talking about this city, and now she's decided this is the one I want to be a part of.
Yep.
So clearly,
it's a good one to be a part of,
as much as we do.
Yep.
She approves. She feels she would be safe in this city.
That's good.
Cat friendly.
You know what? This city is cat friendly. That alone is a good reason for it to win.
Again with the scales. Oh god, cats.
Exactly. Cats and trains. Cats and trains. Cats on trains. Cats in conducted uniforms on trains.
Yes, cats conducting the trains. Yes.
And trains filled with hydroponic base.
Can the builder confirm for us after this event? Are the conductors of the monorail actually cats? If so, I will move there now.
Yeah. We're moving now, aren't we?
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yep.
I'm not sure that's safe. Cat conductors.
It'll be totally safe. Cats are known for their responsibility.
It's a monorail. It can't exactly go wrong. It just goes.
A cat will find a way, though. Let's be honest.
Yes.
They would.
It will go outside and just
knock it off the.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll try to knock it off.
This one, like I said, this one is cat approved. Congratulations, human whose name I will not attempt to pronounce. Maddie, do you want to try?
Qualcapil. That's what I'm going for. I'm sticking with it.
Congratulations, your city is cat approved.
I've been wise enough to try not to say it on stream, and I'm going to try to hold to that.
Yep.
Yeah, congratulations for being our winner and also being cat approved.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Do we have any last minute thoughts or additions that we want to add to this, to the last competitor?
Well, I have one thing on like what could make the city even better, and that would be sort of considering the industry aspect. Because as far as I can tell, it doesn't have any industry, so all goods would be imported pretty much. So a train, cargo train would be great. There's also like ample space to move into some farm industry, perhaps keeping with the green. Especially if there is like a local organic commercial specialization, that would make sense to have for the city.
Honestly, in a forested area like this,
Forestry.
lumber industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like. My initial thought was a forestry industry, just because I can just imagine logging roads going halfway up those hillsides. Get some of those old logging trucks going up there, just old style, like you pick like every 7th tree or something going down the line. I think that could do really, really well in this area, and that. Honestly, in my mind, that's now canon. That's why the city exists. That's why it started.
It was a logging village.
My consideration was, because it's clearly a city that's transitioned and it's grown organically, is that it was more focused on that kind of micro industry feel. So there were small industries throughout it, but we don't necessarily get big industrial swaths of land that
not in the
are very
mountains like
disruptive.
that, no.
Yeah.
So it definitely felt like maybe there was like smaller industries in. Maybe the city switched to tourist income. That is something we often see, especially with mountain cities, is it switches to tourist income all year round. So I feel like there was definitely industry there, even if we didn't necessarily see it. And it could have been any of these we talked about. And that's, again, that exciting thing is
organic.
We want to see more.
It felt there could have been history in this city.
Tell a story with your city.
It was. I loved it. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, that is is important. Telling a story with the cities we build.
Definitely.
It's fantastic to see kind of all the points that we talked about and all the judging criteria, which we had so many more than the ones we've necessarily brought up because we went into quite a bit of detail. I think we had 10 different criteria points we looked through. This one hit it on the head on all of them.
Yeah.
There was none where I was able to nitpick something bad out. And that is a very hard feat to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me too, because like all of my complaints or criticisms and all that are very minor, and it's for a reason. Because A, I want to see good cities improve, and B, this is obviously a very good city, so please improve it and send us more pretty pictures. We'll look at them, we promise.
It definitely feels like all the criticism we had is just making it push it that little bit further. Nothing was very detrimental.
Yeah.
So sure. It was very, very, very well done.
All right. Congratulations to the winners. Thank you so much, judges, for taking time and judging all of these all the submissions. All of the nominees will receive new codes for the new CCPs announced yesterday for bridges and piers and for train stations. So you will receive those. And then the 3 winners will also get the CCPs, but will win a Razer Nari Essential Gaming headset. We will send you an email to ask for your information after the show. So thank you so much for participating. Thank you to the judges. Thanks to me. And yes, more PDXCON content is coming up next. Bye.